Chapter 7. Growing Up. Little Lalia snuck out of the palace to go to her mother's farm. She was determined to get rid of the awful scar on her face. It had started becoming almost like a birthmark, and she really could not stand how it made her look. But more importantly, she had to get the herb for the king. She was determined to help him get well. When she reached her neighborhood, she overheard some people talking about her, about how quickly her fortunes had turned. She had gone from a simple village girl to the king's ward overnight. Some expressed envy over her situation, wishing they were in her shoes, whilst others were more curious about the big scar on the right side of her face. They expressed disgust over it and opined that it made her look hideous. As much as it pained her, she had to agree with them on the scar. This strengthened her resolve to rid her face of it any way she could and as soon as she could. When she got to the farm, she was disappointed to find the farm in ruins. All the remaining crops had died out of neglect. Even the ajulu herb had almost died out. Fortunately for her, she was lucky enough to find one small tuber of the herb. She quickly rushed to find a container to crush it in, carefully to make sure that she kept a piece to grow later. When she had finished preparing the herb, she quickly set out to return to the palace to get the herbs to the king as quickly as she could. That night, she snuck into the king's chambers and rubbed some of the crushed herbs on his injured legs. She made sure she was careful not to wake him, but King Sayumba saw her leave and smiled as he looked down at the herb she had rubbed on his leg. Early the next morning, the king woke up to find that the pain on his right leg had all but gone, and more surprising was the fact that there was no scar where the terrible wound had once been. Amazed by this, he immediately summoned the palace medicine man for answers. But even he was equally amazed and puzzled by the sudden healing of the king's leg. All his life he had tried to grow the ajulu herb but could not. According to folklore and local legend, the herb was not the kind of plant to grow easily. It took more than just knowledge and experience to grow it. One would have to be supernaturally endowed and highly gifted to grow the herb and be able to use it effectively. Upon hearing this, the king sent for little Lalia. Little Lalia responded to the king's summons, but as soon as she entered his chambers, he noticed that the girl was not her usual cheerful self. Unbeknownst to the king, Lalia was unhappy because the herb had not experienced the same healing effect that the king's leg had enjoyed, so she was very disappointed. As she stood before the king, she tried to change her demeanor so the king would not suspect that she was responsible for his healed wounds. "Once again, I am in your debt, my darling girl," the king said, beaming at Lalia. He looked on at the little girl admiringly, almost bursting with pride over her amazing abilities. Even the palace medicine man was in awe of the little girl. He stood gaping at her as the king went on singing her praise. Although the queen was relieved and grateful for the king's healing, she still hated the girl, even more so now that she knew she would have to contend with her presence in the palace a little while longer than she had hoped. With everything that had just transpired, it was going to be extremely hard to get the king to believe anything bad about her. Not even the littlest lie against Lalia would sway him enough to make him hate her. She had little choice but to stand and watch as little Lalia received praises from the king over her seemingly endless gallant actions. King Sayumba asked little Lalia if she knew how to grow the ajulu herb, and when she said she could, he further asked her to explain to him how the herb was grown. As the little girl recounted to the king the process of growing the herb, the palace medicine man named Soyenka listened in awe and concluded then that Lalia was indeed gifted, and he admired her for it. The king, excited over the little girl and her surprising abilities, offered to give little Lalia whatever her heart desired. Lalia, obsessed about getting rid of the scar on her face, was eager to take the king up on his offer and told him that she wanted the opportunity to learn more about herbs and make even better healing concoctions. Physician Soyenka was very excited to hear this and was eager to teach the little girl all he knew, although he suspected that he would also be doing a lot of learning as well. He told Lalia that she could start her apprenticeship the very next day. 3 years passed by and little Lalia grew to be a cheerful, effervescent young adult. She was now 15 years old and was friends with almost everyone, from the king himself to the lowliest slave. Even some of the guards were very fond of her, though some of them wouldn't stop commenting on how hideous she looked. She was closest to 3 slave girls around her age, and even though they were assigned to serve her, Lalia never treated them as slave servants. When she was not hard at work on her apprenticeship with Soyinka, she was somewhere around the palace playing and chatting with her servants. Their names were Sukam, Jaidi and Lilo. These 3 girls were always by her side, comforting and caring for her like their very own sister. When Lalia was being maltreated by the queen or being persecuted by some of the kingdom's natives because of her hideous scars, she always had them to turn to for comfort. Lalia had grown to be very good with herbs. She exhibited great prowess in making healing concoctions with them. But even with her great skills, she could not heal her own scar. She would let her long hair down on the right side of her face to keep it out of view. When she had enough of the Ajulu herb, she would use it on her face and it helped a great deal, but she would quickly start running out of her supply. She had noticed that her stock of the herb was quickly dwindling, and she suspected that it was being stolen by the queen's minions, but she decided to just ignore them. Without the effects of the herb, her scar seemed to grow worse, so bad that she had to resort to using a cloth to tie the affected half of her face until she could get her hands on more of the herb. As her awful luck would have it, Lalia could not seem to grow the herb without the queen becoming aware of it and taking measures to destroy it. It seemed like she had eyes everywhere in the kingdom. The queen would wait until the girl had labored to grow the Ajulu herb, and when they were ripe and ready to be harvested, she would get her loyal subjects to steal and destroy them. She knew how important the herb was to Lalia, and to hurt her, she would limit her access to it. It pleased her to see the girl suffer the way she did over her appearance. For the past 3 years, she had used every plan and weapon in her arsenal to get rid of Lalia, but none of her schemes worked. So she was happy to use any other way she could to hurt Lalia. Lalia's reaction to the stolen herbs always pleased Queen Tati. Oh, what comfort it gave her. Physician Soyinka had tried bringing up Lalia's Ajulu case to the king, but he promptly changed his mind after a visit from the queen. It was then that Lalia knew for certain that she was behind the theft of her Ajulu herb. She knew that she could not tell the king, and even if she wanted to, it would be her word against the queen's, and she did not want to get into that kind of fiasco, so she decided to play along. She decided to continue growing the herbs, and whenever they were ready to be harvested, she would let them set her crops on fire, but not without making sure some of the produce are kept hidden in a secure place.